Hey, what's happening? I'm Claudio, and today I'm going to be building a toy chest for my niece, or nephew. My sister-in-law is pregnant and we still don't know the sex of the baby. But either way, I'm sure they're going to have a lot of toys and they can store some of them in here. If you want to see what I did, stick around. Let's make it now. My wife and I looked all over for toy chest inspiration. I put a few ideas together and built a 3D model. The design is fairly simple, but timeless. A shaker-style chest with a soft-close top. I bought a lot of red oak for a previous table that I built and made sure to buy extra for this and other projects. I measured the boards out to their rough length and marked them out. Using a circular saw, I cut down to those lines. Instead of using a joiner, I made a jig on the table saw to perfectly flatten the edge of a board. You clamp down the board and run the jig against the fence. Once I had a flat side to work with, I put that against the fence and rough cut the boards to width. This project calls for some boards that are 3/4 inch and the rest are 1/2 inch. I rough cut this board just like the other, but ripped it to different widths. I brought over the bandsaw and installed a fence system to be able to resaw the wider boards down to size. I set the fence to the correct width and locked it in place. I passed each board through the blade, making sure to go slow and keep pressure against the fence to make a straight cut. I also used a scrap piece of wood to push the very end of the board safely through the blade. The table saw is much faster than the bandsaw at resawing, assuming your boards are not too tall. I passed all the shorter boards through, making a pass on one side, then flipping it over to make it all the way through. This was a big scrap from the kitchen table that I built. I cut it to width and then resawed to make it the same as the other pieces. I can now use the planer to bring all the boards down to their final thickness. I took off about a 1/16 of an inch with each pass. Every board goes through, then you move the blades down and then run all the boards through again. Back at the table saw, I ripped each board down to their final width according to the plans. I used the miter saw to cut the boards down to final length. These pieces I'm cutting are for the top of the toy chest, which are 3/4 inch thick. I repeated the same exact process for the rest of the boards. These are only 1/2 an inch thick and different dimensions than before. I ripped them to width on the table saw and then cut them down to their final length on the miter saw. For same size pieces, I set up a stop block to keep them consistent. I finally had all my boards. For some reason they looked like a cityscape when I put them flat on the table, so I arranged them for fun. Then got to laying out my top. I grabbed some clamps and laid out the boards for the top. I added some wood glue and then spread it out using my finger. I added some light pressure and then used some additional clamps to keep the board centered vertically. Once everything was secure, I let the top dry overnight. The next morning, I removed the clamps and made sure everything looked good. Then I glued up the bottom panel in the same way. I got rid of most of the glue from the joints using a card scraper. I used a belt sander with 80 grit paper to rough sand, then sanded to 220 grit with a random orbit sander. Using the table saw sled, I trimmed the top and bottom to the final length, then did some fine sanding and eased the edges. Well, that's where we're going to leave it this week. We went over bringing the rough sawn lumber down to the necessary pieces, and the construction of the top and bottom. Next week, I'll be building the frame and finishing off the entire piece. If you missed these videos, you can check them out. They're related to this one. You can follow me on social media at Make It Now channel, and you can find me on my website at makeitnow.tv. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.